The Huntsman of Adamos, The Huntsman's Honor, Chapter 9, Breaking a Huntsman's Heart. In the morning, Yurieth woke to the sound of his daughters arguing. He stalked out to find the source, and discovered Roseray, sitting at her desk, writing notes about some patient, unperturbed by the racket. "Can you not hear them?" Yurieth demanded. "I'm working," Roseray said coldly. "Girls, be silent!" He bellowed down the hall at them, and they quieted. "I'm not leaving my home or my healer's practice, and you are not taking them away to live with your parents," she announced, standing to face him. "Roseray, it is not safe for you to live here unprotected. The village and castle are too far away for the guardsmen to save you if invaders come here." She scoffed, mocking him. "You can't intimidate me into leaving, Yurieth. We are winning, aren't we? They wouldn't dare come back. Roseray, we know the Zalutians are preparing to send warriors back to Etheria because they cannot beat us on their own world. We believe the royals will be the targets. You need to be somewhere defensible. I need you and our daughters to be safe. Please, move to my mother's castle and let my brother protect you." He was begging her, but he could tell from her posture and the feelings emanating from her soul that she was going to refuse. He hated that he had enough oracle magic to read souls but not influence them. "I will not leave my home, and you will not move my daughters," she announced. "I told you, if you left, don't come back. Why won't you listen? You are my wife, and I will not abandon you or my children," he gritted out angrily. "Father," Willow and Lily were standing in the door, staring at them with uncertainty. "Can we go out on our skiff?" "Just go," Roseray snapped at them. Their daughters stood frozen. "Go ahead, girls," he said to them gently. "Don't yell at them when you are angry with me," Yurieth snarled at her. They stood glaring at one another until the girls closed the door behind them. "How dare you?" Roseray hissed. "How dare I? I am not the one whose foolish pride is putting my children at risk. You always were a selfish and foolish girl, following the pathetic opinions of courtiers who have never faced the enemy. You are more frustrating and childish than my daughters have ever been," he yelled at her. "How would you know how our daughters are? You are gone for years on end. You know nothing about how much it hurts them every time you leave," Roseray accused. "They are of Adamos. They understand it is my duty to serve and our honor that I do so." He defended himself. "They are proud of my dedication and the honors I've earned for our house." "Ha!" Roseray laughed, then mocked. "Their father, the great Huntsman of Adamos, the war hero. Someday they will know you are just a murderer who abandoned them for the first 2 decades after their birth. I was doing my duty." A huntsman on the war front is ridiculous, and everyone knows it. You were just playing at being a warrior and betraying our marriage because you have no sense of responsibility or honor, and you never will, she screamed at him. "You don't deserve to know them or be near them, and someday they will see the truth. Then I will take them away from you forever." Yurieth found his hand closing around her throat, and he dragged her toward him, lifting her until her toes left the floor. She clawed at his arms, eyes wide and terrified. He trembled in rage as he threatened, "I have more honors than most warriors on our world, or I would not have put up with your naive idealism for so long. I only tolerate you for their sake. I have spent almost 3 centuries knowing I was only married to you for the alliance between our houses. I tried to love you. I even left behind a woman who loved me more than a shrew like you could ever love anyone but herself. The truth is that I was unfaithful once. Once and never again. I regretted it then, but now I regret coming back to you more." He released her, and she crumpled to the floor. He snatched her back up to her feet by her arm. "Pack your things, wife. You will live in my mother's castle, or you will live in the city of the kings. Your choice." She slapped him, trying to pull away as he dragged her to her room. "I hate you, Yurieth of Adamos. I never loved you, and I never will," she choked out as she clutched at her throat. He could see the bruises he made forming on her pale skin after he threw her on her bed. "Are not capable of love, you mean? You're a healer who doesn't know how to love, and you dare call my dedication to my duty false?" He knew he needed to leave before he hurt her more, so he let his words promise her the violence he wanted to commit against her. "The feeling is mutual, Rose Ray of Adamos. When our daughters turn 200, you may leave without them. But if you try to take them away from me, I will take you to Zelucia and give you to the Berserker blood warriors personally. You do not want to know what they do to pretty little healers, my dear wife." Yurieth promised. Then he turned on his heel and strode out. As he walked out the rear door, he slung his bow, sword, and a quiver of arrows over his shoulders. He needed to hunt. He needed to kill something before he murdered his ungrateful, foolish wife. He was very far from the house when he heard his daughters call out to him in terror. To his horror, he felt Lily dying violently and ran harder. Then Willow died. His soul cleaved painfully with the realization they would not revive because someone was harvesting their blood. He cursed the small amount of oracle magic that he had, which allowed him to feel such things so horribly clearly. Roseray was being hurt, violated, while her blood was being taken by many. But the smell of smoke drove his rage. He felt his mother and brother call out to him and ignored them as Roseray died to never revive. At the edge of the clearing that held his burning home, he saw a dozen berserker warriors, a blood mage journeyman, and an assassin of the Blood Brotherhood. He could see the blood mage holding magic orbs that were filled with his children's life essence. His first shot went through the mage's head with enough power that it exploded. Another arrow shattered the orbs holding his daughter's blood. Then he put 2 arrows in the assassin. He barely felt the assassin's throwing blades as they pierced his body. He knew he was going to die with his family, and he vowed to take as many of the enemy with him as he could. Yurieth shouted to his mind to hold on. They were coming, but Yurieth didn't care if he was saved. all he could feel was the cold emptiness where he had once felt his little girl's heartbeats. His heart died with them. 3 more of the berserker warriors fell before they finally managed to get him on the ground. It took all 6 remaining Zalusian warriors to hold him down. Standing over him as he lay on the blood-wet grass, the assassin spoke. "Huntsman of Adamos, today your kind is ended for the death of second Prince Demonis, son of King Apollyon and Queen Baelonia. No more will the magic of the ghost of the forest hunt the blood mages and the blood brotherhood of Zalusia." Coughing, Yurieth spat his words and blood on the assassin, promising, "You had better forever kill me before my brother comes, because if I live, I will never stop hunting your kind or your king." The assassin laughed and stood up, pulling the signature, half-serrated short sword of the blood brotherhood. Raising the smooth side of the sword above Yuri's neck, the assassin hesitated, then dropped to the ground with 2 arrows in the back of his head. Yurieth jerked his arm away from one of the berserkers and impaled his comrade through the neck with his cursed blade as Yurieth removed the disarmed one's head. There was a blinding flash of oracle light from across the lake, and the berserkers staggered. Regis killed a third, holding Yurieth's legs, as Regulus slayed 3 on his own. The Protector and the Huntsman aided the Guardian as Yurieth knelt over Roseray. She had been badly beaten and assaulted in the manner in which the berserkers treated any female they decided to kill. The warriors had bitten her in many places as they drank her blood to steal her healing magic. However, using her magic to heal themselves did not matter to those whom Yurieth had decapitated. Yurieth wept over Roseray as his brother and allies killed the last of the enemy. He had failed to protect her. He had never truly loved her, but she was his wife, the mother of his children, and that counted for something. Abrieth picked up Lily as Regis picked up Willow. Yurieth forced himself to lift Roseray in his arms with Regulus's steadying hand under his elbow. He could feel Regis's heart-heal magic keeping him from collapsing. Together, they carried his family back to the flyer that had brought Abrieth, Regulus, and Regis to his burning home. Landing in the courtyard of the summer castle of Yafriel, Yurieth stepped off first. His mother was weeping in his father's arms. Most of the castle staff had gathered. Many were distressed and openly crying. His daughter had been loved by all of them. Regulus stood before Yurieth and held out his arms. "Give her to me, Master Huntsman, and let your mother tend your wounds until a healer arrives." Yurieth's arms tightened reflexively around Roseray. He looked at her abused body, then pressed a kiss to her temple. "I am so sorry, my briar rose. It is my fault. I killed you," he whispered gently. Then he gave her to his mentor. He kissed the foreheads of each of his daughters and removed the oracle stone from Willow's neck, his oracle stone. His weeping mother led him away. Sitting in a chair, he barely felt her cleansing his wounds and dabbing them with healing potion. He was blind and deaf to everything except the memory of his family's murder replaying in his mind. Yurieth, speak to me, his mother Yelmina implored. He looked at her with tears streaming down his face. I killed them, Mother. The Blood Brotherhood assassin knew who I was, knew my rank and my house. He killed them and came for me because of who I am in the war. It is my fault that my daughters are dead. I killed them, he repeated. His heart stuttered to a stop as he cursed the light. You did not kill them, Yurieth. The Zelutians came here with the purpose of destroying the Huntsman of Etheria, and they almost succeeded, Yelmina revealed to him. He looked at her oddly through the haze of his grief. What do you mean? Immediately after you left Zelusia 2 days ago, there was an attack against the Huntsman. A group launched for Etheria. The Guardians, Regulus, Ra-Itath, and Soltaris, and the Huntsmen, Regis, Drennan, and Seamus, chased after them. Once they were here, they split up. Regulus and Regis arrived just after we felt the girls. Yelmina sobbed as she stopped. Yurieth looked at his father. Father, what news? Bowing his head, Adamos revealed the guardian Ra-Itath and the huntsman Seamus, followed of the larger group of Zelusians to the school. The assassins killed Master Huntsman Axion, and Master Material, and almost everyone at the Huntsman Academy. Guardian Soltaris and Huntsman Drennan went to save the king and his family. The Zelusians killed Queen Palla and her children, while King Xerxes fought off a dozen berserker warriors and 2 mages after the royal guardsmen were killed. The guardian Ra-Itath now protects the king. The guardian Soltaris barely survived the battle, but your friend Drennan did not. Most of the huntsmen of Etheria and their families have been murdered this day. Yelmina wept as she kissed Yurieth's hands. I'm sorry. I know you wish to join your family and friends, but I am glad you did not die this day. Yurieth stopped crying and became completely still. Everything he had worked for over the last century, over the last 5 centuries, every huntsman he had trained except 2 were lost. Without a word, he put his oracle stone in her hand and went to the room he kept in his childhood summer home to put on the extra uniform and armor he always kept there. He walked into the room where they were preparing his family for their pyre and cut a lock of each of their hair, taking one last look at the price he had paid for this war. Then he went out to where Regis and Regulus stood with Yurieth and his father. "Take me to the Huntsman's Academy now." Yurieth's tone left no question of refusing him. As they flew over the lake and away from the summer-like castle of his mother's family, Yurieth looked at the smoke rising from across the water where his home now smoldered, and took all the blame on himself. If he wasn't who he was in the war, this would never have happened. His daughters would still be alive, and their mother wouldn't have hated him. Oddly, he didn't feel any pain, only cold purpose. In the coordinated effort, the Zelusians had attacked all of the huntsmen on both worlds, and Yurieth vowed to make them pay. The school for huntsmen had fallen, with less than a dozen novices surviving after Axion sent them through the dark labyrinth tunnels to beyond the school grounds. Yurieth stalked through the campus with Yurieth and Seamus following. Seamus had not yet made Master Huntsman. He did not have the magic for it, but he was one of the strongest skilled, lesser-magicked huntsmen Yurieth had mentored. The Master Huntsman Axion was found dead with all 18 journeymen and 45 older novices. The 9 youngest novices had escaped to the territory held by the House of Adamos, whose warriors and huntsmen had rushed to the school to kill the remaining Zelusians. The master, his journeymen, and the older novices of the Huntsman Academy had killed almost 100 berserker warriors and a dozen assassins before the House of Adamos arrived. 9 mages, including 2 females, were found among the Zelusian dead. Yurieth knelt over some of the dead journeyman huntsmen, studying their wounds. "What is wrong, Master Huntsman?" Huntsman Seamus asked. "Their wounds are what is wrong, Seamus. It almost appears as if they were slain by their comrades instead of the enemy. These are the kinds of wounds we would inflict on an enemy. It is our weapon-wielding style," Yurieth pronounced. "Perhaps the Zelusians are cross-training in combat as we are," Yurieth suggested. He lifted a long, curved blade from a dead berserker. It was similar in shape and size to a huntsman's curved long knife. "They are changing their weapons, the weapons they carry, from the traditional serrated short swords, axes, and polearms. I also found a bow on one of the assassins. It looks like they are taking a page from your war book, big brother." "Let them try, little brother. I will not give them the time to master the skills I have spent centuries perfecting." Yurieth growled his words as he turned the blade in his hand before looking back at the dead novices and journeymen. It could have made the wounds, but it did not have the balance or edge of a huntsman's blade. He shook his head at the thought his mind presented. His students would not have slain each other. Master Material was found murdered in his home with his wife Anne Vaughn and their twins, and 4 of his journeymen assassin-seekers. Yurieth asked Regis to stay and mentor the remaining novices of the first year, the only survivors from the academy. Of Seamus, he asked for the lesser huntsman with shepherd's magic to search the common houses for anyone with huntsman's magic. Seamus had an unusual affinity for discerning the type of magic people had. Lastly, he asked the guardian Regulus to send all the surviving huntsmen back for 1 year, and for all the retired huntsmen from the House of Adamos to return to duty. Yurieth needed to rebuild the Huntsman Corps, and he needed to rebuild it fast. But more than that, he needed to figure out what the Zellusians were scheming now that they believed all the huntsmen were dead. 1 year later. There were now only 10 huntsmen and 2 master huntsmen remaining. Each had 2 novices. Yurieth left Regis in charge of the school while he went to do the work of the 110 huntsmen who had been slain. Dressed in black, Yurieth bid Abrieth and Regulus farewell when he stepped off the transport. Yurieth disappeared for lunars at a time behind Zellusian lines. No one heard from him when he was gone, not even his brother, but they all heard of him. A lone huntsman rescuing villages and ghettos before sending the commoners to the Aetherian lines for sanctuary. A ghost traveling across the whole of Zellusia, killing blood mages and blood brotherhood assassins alike, decimating the upper classes and turning the lower classes against their rulers. Yurieth used every skill he had ever learned from his mentors, and even some he made up for himself, to become the thing the Zellusian royals had nightmares about. The Black Huntsman was the most feared living being on 2 worlds, and the greatest weapon in the king's arsenal. The end, Chapter 9, Breaking a Huntsman's Heart. The next chapter is 10, Moments Between Brothers. Thank you for listening.